Hello and welcome to the New World Review, where Gon is a loser, Palm is a winner, and Killua didn't enter the race because he was too scared he'd be brushed aside. Killua, I need you to stop stalking Gon now, please. Palm, you're a cutie, you keep doing what you're doing, but maybe stop stabbing the dolls, though. Episode 92. Where we open this episode was with the real protagonist of the arc, Colt. Colt listening to what's happening. We followed him very closely through everything that happened, and it was a very status-focused episode. We've discussed this before, the way status plays out in the show, and how the characters deal with being better than or worse than others. This episode was very much about pedestals. Pedestals and where characters place others. It was less about their own perceived status and more about the status of those they perceived, and that's a very delicate difference that I'm not sure I can describe any better, but I really enjoyed seeing it. Gon realized he is a loser compared to the others, and that he couldn't spend time moping about it, how bad it was, because others, Knuckle and that other guy, coward guy, whose name I've forgotten, others would continue the fight on his behalf. They would save Kite. Kite, who was given a memorial episode, despite all the characters in the scene between Gon and Spin putting him on this pedestal of power and empathy and light and love. The art of Kite in the sun looked very much like he was walking toward the light, that all they could see was his silhouette because he was so bright and magnificent. There were no eyes. Importantly, we couldn't see his eyes, and that made sense because to see Kite's eyes is to know him, to know his thoughts, to engage with him in the present when we still know that he's dead in any meaningful sense of the word. The empathy Kite showed in episodes with Gon and Killua and with the other members of the annoying crew showed his eyes, because the softening of eyes is the humanity of Kite. Beheaded, that humanity is now gone. Not gone. No matter what we might see, Kite is no longer that. More, Kite cannot be that, but the silhouette is bold enough a figure that if they see it, they will hesitate. The power a person has over another is directly related to the power a person perceives them having. It's an emotionally dangerous place, even without anything else. It leaves everyone who cares about Kite open to emotional harm, again, without even seeing him. Just learning of his death. Meanwhile, at the start of the episode, we had Netero deciding to do the empathic thing and trying to save the queen from her inevitable demise. And the most important thing about this is the shirt Netero decided to wear. The pedestal was placed down for Netero to stand on, with Morel and another guy getting intensely excited about the idea that Netero might actually fight for real. Meanwhile, Netero's preparing his own pedestal to hand over to the king, because he suspects, correctly, that the king is going to be more powerful than he is, so he needs to find someone else capable of more power than he is. In all of this, I feel Netero is the most accurate with his pedestal placing, but since it's ultimately dependent on Colt's assessment, maybe not. With everyone gone, especially Gon, saving the queen becomes a game of futility. She's too different to do anything else, and there was something notable about the organ specialist's suggestion that Colt pray. Two reasons. The first is that she treated him no differently to how she would treat a human, suggesting that perhaps they could live in harmony if, all of the bad ones just stopped. The other is that she's asking Colt to pray when the person he idolizes is in front of her. The queen has been, since Colt's rebirth, his return to life, his God. She's his God. Everything he's done has been in service to her. We could talk about him as a disciple and not be too far wrong. The problem is that Colt, deluded, can't handle her flaws. They're different organisms with different value systems, and Colt's tried to hold to the old ways to protect his mother twice, despite not being built to do so. And that opened a Pandora's box of problems, one of which being that the duty of a mother is a powerful thing in this world. The queen had to die to preserve the role of mothers, to suffer and perish for their sons, but Colt is not okay with that expectation. He's a blend of the old world and the new, despite wanting to give to her of himself. He was willing to sacrifice himself for her benefit and to lie to her about the king, which is, in itself, heartbreaking. The passing of the gauntlet between generations and now here is the hope at the bottom of Pandora's box. That weird little baby thing that came out of the queen. And that's a serious problem, isn't it? What if the king was supposed to be the soul of his sister, but was born prematurely? Who did the queen leave behind? You don't just get lost in an ant's organs alive. That's not... it shouldn't. Don't. Also, where did the octopus guy with the beard come from? Was he a friend of theirs? Do they just need an extra old guy? Is that just a thing that's necessary? Always have an old guy nearby. And now that we have a name for the king, Miriam, the light that illuminates all, I have a strong expectation that we bring Illumi into all of this, because you can't call a character Illumi and not have him illume something. Yes, we know he's illuming the curse in Killua, but I get the feeling he can multitask. Maybe he should be illuming more. Speaking of multitasking, this was the first time it became explicit that not only can the ants remember their past lives, but that they must have discussed it at some point to know it's a common experience. Does this mean that as they begin to spread across the world, they decide to mate with what they know, or that they'll mate with what they don't? The thing is, at this point, I can see the corner being painted. How do you create such an invulnerable natural phenomenon and not have the series end because of its existence? Put another way, they will take over the world. They can. It's an unstoppable force. Nature is an unstoppable force. And when the point of the unstoppable force is simply to breed and grow ranks, which they can do very quickly, there's no reason they wouldn't be world-breaking. And it adds to my lack of understanding, though it's been suggested to me before that there is a way, but it hasn't been noted in the anime why we haven't seen this scenario play out before. The only way I could imagine it having played out is if Killwa's family are in fact the remains of an earlier generation of ants, because it would explain his strange blade hand without Nen situation. He's not human. I've never really thought he was, but I don't know what he is, and that's the point. Since the king wants some tasty food or to breed, because I'm not using any other word for this, we're somewhat PG, right? Let's move on to episode 93 to find out how he hunts. And you know what? Episode 93, you gotta feel bad for the king at the top of this. They're not gonna be tasty or worthy of his expensive palate. The decision to have the person in a position of authority that he's headed toward just be a kind of crappy person puts a judgment call in our laps. Who is more worthy of life and control of the population? Who deserves to be where they are? Because he's right, really, isn't he? In the hands of an incompetent, power does bring nothing but ruin. There are times this show really kicks me in the 2020, you know? What doesn't seem good is the shifting in color of the king's Nen. I recognize that from Dragon Ball Z. When characters get too powerful, the basic colors don't fit anymore. There's a color spectrum instead. It's interesting how quickly, despite not knowing how royalty works in the human world, Magneto, I can't remember his name already, he follows the steps of industry. Immediately we have a human farm, which makes a lot of sense, but I also don't think he cared about the soldiers enough to provide for them. What's he gonna do when he realizes they've all struck out on their own to become kings too, in a very similar early pattern to the one he just mocked? It's really interesting to me that despite being so advanced, they're also very simple, because this behavior, the striking out to make your fortune, happens in lions and in humans without a power structure, but I don't know how far ahead they're thinking. Do they plan to mount a coup? Will they try to get him to like them? How are they going to prove their strength, worthiness, and power? I guess if they can keep the top half of their bodies, that would be a strong start, but still, it's an interesting psychological behavior for a colony of ants to take on, even if they are mixed with other creatures. And do they all benefit from consuming Nen if they can get it? I know the rare humans are tasty, but the queen didn't benefit from it, so I'm interested to learn if it's something they can all gain, not just the king. Speaking of which, so many of them did get a Nen fusion. If he ate an ant with Nen, would he get Nen from them? Before I move on entirely from King Mahosafat, I do need to mention his admittedly fair point about pigs and cows, though it's odd where Togashi has decided to leave information in and where it's missing. That specific comment about whether we give mercy to animals on the way to the slaughter seems a lot like the writer rather than the character having input. It stood out because it's an odd level of knowledge for someone without an understanding of how humans live. The rest of this episode will be dedicated to the cuteness of a love triangle. I mean, I don't even really want to go into the discussion about Gon being potentially abused as a younger child, because that's what it would be. I have no idea how old Palm is, so I'm not going to comment on that more than I am right now. Let's focus instead on Killwa's reaction to it all. Killwa manages to stalk them the whole day. He follows Gon through all his planning for a date. He observes as Gon has fun with someone who's not him, and he gently reveals that jealousy straight through the entire montage. His need to protect Gon is a self-driven love thing. If he thought clearly, he'd realized that Palm is also a Nen user, or at least we were led to believe that, since she's also an apprentice of one of the other dude bras, and that he didn't need to be that close. He didn't need to watch the entire day. He can sense Gon from further away than that. And it seems that Gon wanted to be on this date. He likes Palm. Despite her destruction of him hundreds of times over, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times over, he recognized that she was just disappointed and needed to be treated well. It's actually frighteningly an example of good behavior. He apologized appropriately. He told her he would do something, he failed, and he asked how he could make reparations. And then he followed through in earnest. It's the least psychopathic thing I've seen him do, and honestly, it's quite endearing. Like the way he took Killwa on a date when they ended up back home, he put care into the date he took Palm on. And she's been very clear. This is the first date. The first date. And she turned up to it with excitement, joie de vivre, and a certain je ne sais quoi that makes me wonder whose perspective perspective we've been seeing her at this whole time, because given how much of an affinity Gon's had with Palm, I suspect how she arrived at the date is exactly how he's seen her the whole time. And that terrifies the jealous Killua because it suggests that there will be a second date. Maybe, if they survive, a third. Who knows? Not me. The sweetness of all this is the fact that Killua's realizing he doesn't have the social experience. He didn't have the social experience Gon had growing up, and that maybe he's missed something as a person while not being certain at all he wants it. Of course, it's not what he wants, though. In what world would we assume Killua's heterosexual? No. He's not a fan of humans, he's a fan of Gon, and that's a very specific desire. The sad and concerning part of this is that Killua feels he has something to prove to Gon and to himself, and so now he's going to take on Bunny Boy alone, and that's clear. In every step of protecting Gon the day before, he was looking for escape methods. Now he's being offensive because he doesn't want to distract them from their date, but more because he doesn't want Gon to come running. I wonder whether in the end his love of Gon will win out, or if the curse will return. It would be very damning for his ego if he not only fails to protect Gon, but then Palm does. I'm intrigued and I want to know more and see more and more, which is great. There are still episodes to watch, so I'll go do that, and for now, that's it from me. If you enjoyed this dive into love triangles and hope, click here and maybe here. Make sure you're hydrating, get yourself some food, and I'll see you next time.